So there's a lot of amps out there and there's a lot of amp sims out there to the point where it can be very hard to decide one that you're going to purchase, especially if you're only going to buy one. So today I'm going to go through 3 of my favorite amp tones and amp sims that I use on a daily basis. One of the amps is actually the worst sounding one, but I feel like I can't live without it just because it's the way that I monitor my guitar tones going into Ableton with 0 latency. The other 2 sound a lot better, and they're the ones that I use when I'm mixing bands and when I'm mixing my own stuff. So today I'm going to go through those 3 amps and I'm going to choose my one Desert Island amp if I had to choose one for heavy tones. I'm going to go through 2 metal riffs in a song that I've recently made. So we're going to see how these amps handle chugs, how they handle chords, and how they handle notes. So if that sounds interesting to you, please make sure to watch the rest of the video, as I'll be giving little snippets of information about each amp and their different strengths and their different characteristics. Cool, so let's dive right in. So the first one is going to be the Putney STL Tonality. Awesome plugin, I really like this one. When I open up my Ableton session, it's my stock amp. And the second amp we're going to be going through is the Fortin NTS. I really like this amp for its mid presence. It's very cutty. The grind pedal, which is the best pedal in the world. It's really good at doing that one thing. If you have chords and choruses, I don't really like to use this one, but the third amp I end up using probably the most, only because it's a UAD plugin, and when I'm recording guitars, I'm running through console so that I don't get any latency when I'm recording. So I always have this Diezel amp, Diezel Herbert. It's really cool. It has this mid cut. A lot of the times I will have this raw plugin, which I believe is a rat emulator. So I'll usually put the raw right before it, and then I put this Diezel plugin. So to reference these 3 amps, I'm going to go through one of the songs that I already worked on this channel. If you want to hear the whole thing, you can go to the link in the description. It's for my BeatStars account, and if you're a vocalist and you want to do vocals on it, feel free to grab a license. So anyways, one of the parts is the chorus, and there's a lot more chords and a lot more like notes. So one thing to keep in mind for all these plugins, the STL Tonality has a few pedals built in, which are all awesome. There's the distortion, the delay, and the reverb. The NTS, the Fortin, also has some built-in plugins. There's the Diezel noise gate, there's the hex drive overdrive pedal, and then there's the grind. Friggin' awesome for chuggy stuff, but terrible for chords. Don't ever use it on chords. If I find you using it on chords, there's gonna be years of shame. So for the first part, we'll go with the UAD plugins. These are the amp tones I use when I'm recording, so let's listen to the chorus as if we were recording it, see what this amp sounds like. So that sounds friggin' awesome. Before we even really jump into this, you can't go wrong with either 3 of these options. Very cool. You can hear it's a lot more mid-present than the UAD. The UAD seems to have more of like the low end and high end with a scooped sound, whereas the NTS is anything but scooped. I usually use it as a layer amp. I don't often use it as my main guitar sound. I mean, you can really hear it throughout the entire part, but especially on those low notes, there just isn't the low definition that we want. But there is the mid definition that's awesome, which is why I usually use NTS as a layer amp more so than on its own. So next we'll go through the STL Putney plugin. I love this plugin for a lot of reasons. One, every single setting sounds great. And there's 4 amps to choose from as well as a bass amp. You can go into mixer mode here, and you can select 2 amps to blend them. I do this with the NTS and the STL one. I find like I get a better result from running 2 separate heads. Innovation in this plugin is amazing. I've been really liking this Diezel, the VH4, I believe. So here we are, here's the Putney STL Tonality. Yeah, first of all, it's awesome. There's no surprise that the best producer and the best mixer for metal music would come up with the best guitar amp plugin. Second of all, I noticed that the Putney plugin as well as the Diezel Herbert have like the similar sound of more scooped. Putney one I just feel like has like way more balls and way more depth to it. I really like that plugin. just sounds heavy. Still clear, still clear. So next, let's go to another section. Let's see. So this is basically like a verse tom section. There's mostly chugs and open notes and like bends on the top string. So here's the UAD for that tom verse part. So that's pretty good. It doesn't blow you out of the water. It's probably the most expensive amp out of all of these. I think it's like 150 bucks. And I don't regret it because I needed an amp that I can use recording so that I don't have to hear latency while I'm trying to record guitars, because it's the most annoying thing in the world. Even when you go into Ableton, there's a little Ableton hack here. If you're recording, you go into reduced latency when monitoring. It kind of works. There's still latency, I'll tell you that much. UAD really has it down. And that's why that amp was worth it for me. I'd rather hear an okay amp with no latency than the best amp with latency when I'm trying to record guitars. There's enough problems as it is. Cool, so now let's go to the Fortin NTS. It's kind of ratty, but in a really cool way. Like, it's very mid-heavy, and you feel every chug. And the definition that comes out from the notes are really cool. It's like, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of sub information, but that's okay. It doesn't need the sub information. It's not Subway. It's not Mr. Sub. It's not Quiznos. It's Fortin NTS. Get it right. Again, I really like that plugin for mixing amp tones. So again, it's similar to the UAD, I guess because they're both Diezel sims, but just so much better. There's so much more grab to it. Like, there's almost more note clarity from the UAD one, which has its time and its place. I prefer the metal sound from the STL, as well as having clarity. It has the distortion and the grab. You can get the NTS to sound similar to the Tonality and also similar to the UAD, but it's not its strongest suit and it doesn't do those amps as well, just like these amps. I don't think these amps can actually possibly do the NTS sound. It has like a very specific sound. And I guess it has to do with the pedals, first of all. This is with the hex drive, but also the fact that you have grind right here, you have girth, and you have gain. Girth, I notice a bit more low end information. Grind is more of the chug, which as you can see, I'm reefing it because I really like that aspect of this amp. And then gain is just like your normal gain. I ended up liking this for this sound because it had enough Subway information for me at Quiznos. It kind of sounds like cardboard though. Kind of sounds like a cardboard box with like shreddies in it. The NTS, like I've said, comes in handy a lot when I'm trying to mix amp tones. Just like how the Putney amp has the studio mode where you can go in, it's called mixer mode, where you can go in and choose 2 amps. I like to do that afterwards. So I get the best sound that I possibly can from one of the amps in the STL tonality, and then I go into NTS and I fill in whatever I'm missing from the STL. So this is with one layer of amps, this is just the STL. And this is with the STL and the NTS. It doesn't sound as good with the UAD and the NTS. The UAD doesn't want to cooperate. The UAD is like, you're using me, and you're only using me, and if you use another amp, I'm gonna fade. Whereas the STL sounds great with the NTS. It adds, and then you don't have to hear me do this voice over and over again, because it sounds good. Now we're gonna move on. And when I'm mixing, this is usually what I'm doing. I almost always take whatever DI I'm given, if it's metal music, and then I put said guitar DIs into probably the STL first, because I know it just sounds sick. And then I haven't gone through any of the cab options in any of these amps. I find which cab am I using on here? just the stock cab for the STL just sounds really good. I also really like the Extinctions guitar cab. and the Holy War one's really sick. I don't really know what this band is though. I usually either use this cab 1 matching cab, for my guitars at least, the 8-string Ibanez RG8, and this custom piece of garbage thing that used to be a table and was turned into a guitar probably. So those are the 3 amps that I personally use every single friggin' day that I'm working on metal. If I'm working on metal or hardcore or punk or anything distorted, I'm using one of those 3 amps. This is crazy and sounds disgusting, but there's a purpose for it. With one of the artists I'm working with, it's a punk artist, and we've really been liking the sound of the STL with the cab just off. It sounds terrible, so brace yourself, but... Sounds terrible, but it sounds really cool. Certain times you just use whatever suits the music, and if it sounds bad, sometimes the bad thing is why it sounds cooler and why it has a character. So for this punk artist, we turn the cab off, sounds terrible, sounds really bad, everything's distorted, you can't tell what's what, but it's the vibe. That's all that matters, it's the vibe. And for me, if I had to choose one, the Putney one, it would be my choice because it fits the vibe every single time. Although the NTS has a sound and a characteristic that you can't get from any of the other plugins that I've tried, I probably use it the least. I use the UAD one technically the most. It sounds the worst in my opinion, especially because it doesn't have like metal suited plugins. UAD is like a bunch of guys who are like, oh, give them the legacy plugins for free. Give them the raw plugin for free. We're not gonna make a good tube screamer, but that's not 150 bucks. So I'll display the prices on screen for all these amps. I strongly suggest the Putney one. It is a little bit of a CPU hog. They all are a little bit CPU other than UAD because it's using the processor, but then you have to buy the whole friggin' interface. And the way I see it is that you can either choose to have a car and drive around at your convenience and have a really good time, or you can buy a UAD interface, buy one of their plugins for a very large amount of money, and probably, I don't know, make beats. So yeah, if I had to choose one of these amps to be my desert island heavy metal amp, it would definitely be the Putney STL. There's just the most variety when it comes to amp sounds itself. The cabs, there's tons of them. You even put a structures cab in there. I float between really liking this one, which I believe by the looks of it is a Bogner Ubershell. We'll call it the Bogner, just so I feel a bit good about myself. And the Diezel. And then there's also a bass amp in here, which is friggin' crazy because the other 2 amps, it's just a guitar amp and that's all you get. Will's like, I'm gonna give you those amps and I'm gonna give you a bass amp, I'm gonna give you a delay and a reverb, I'm gonna give you a crazy amount of cabs, one of them being a structures cab, and I'm gonna give you an EQ. And this EQ is friggin' crazy. I will say the UAD sounds the worst. It's just, you know, the NTS is meant for metal, it's meant for modern metal. The STL, Putney, is meant for modern metal. The UAD is meant for some guy at home to be taking the money he spent on his plugins and friggin' wiping his tears because he's so upset that he doesn't have an 8-string yet. He has all this money in the world, but he hasn't bought an 8-string yet, which is weird because if you ask me, the Rat kind of looks like an 8-string right there, you know? That kind of looks like an 8-string. This is my metal songwriting template. I'll probably do a video in the future on templates and why I find them so useful. The thing with setting like templates and setting your key commands and all the macros and stuff is that you have so much more time saved, so you can probably watch another one of my videos or something like that. So I don't know. Cool, so I open up the guitars. There's my record track. Main one, look at that. I didn't lie. It's even the Diezel. It's even the Diezel amp that I spoke about. And did I use the structures cab or did I use... It's a structures song. So thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you found any use in this video. And if you have any questions about any of these amps, let me know down below and I'll be sure to answer you as quickly as I can. Also, comment down below. I want to know which amp you're using that you really like. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. See ya.